good day to you all. My young ladies, how many of you all believe in God? Okay. Or what is your reaction towards dogs?
They're man's best friend.
Okay. Yes, Alice?
I'm scared of dogs, ma'am.
You're scared of dogs. Okay. What about ice cream?
I love ice cream.
You love ice cream. So today we are trying to find out what are the different reactions, what are the positions we take on different issues, persons, people, institutions, social groups. And we have come to a great topic in social psychology known as attitudes. Could you tell me what is attitudes?
Your perception of a situation and your reaction to it.
Your perception and your reaction, yes. Your reaction.
Your opinion?
Your opinion. Yes, Ansu?
Maybe a response, ma'am?
Very good, a response. Now let's see what the psychologists say. According to the psychologists, attitude is a learned tendency to behave in a particular manner, in a reasonably consistent manner towards a person, object, situation or idea. It is relatively enduring predisposition. It's a tendency to respond, tendency to act. It is said to be a learnt predisposition. When I was born, when I was a baby, I didn't have any attitudes. I learnt it as I grew up. Though there are some psychologists who say, hey, no, it is also partly genetic. They have found that identical twins have identical or similar attitudes regarding certain issues. Even identical twins who were separated from birth do have a similar attitude regarding certain things. Not on all things, regarding certain things. But generally, attitudes are learned predispositions. They are learned ways of reacting towards objects, towards dogs, ice cream, towards any institution. You love your school, you love your college. It could be towards people, you love your teachers, you love dad, you love mom. So you find that you have a tendency to respond to certain people, to certain organizations, to certain issues, to certain objects, to certain ideas. So they're also known as lasting evaluations. Attitudes are also known as lasting evaluations. So sum it up together, you find attitudes are made up of beliefs, emotion and action. Think that once again you are in your lower KG. I'm teaching you A, B, C. Just A, B and C. A, B, C model of attitudes. A stands for affect. A stands for affect. B stands for behavior. C stands for cognitive. These are the three components of the term attitudes. When I say affect, what do you mean by affect? I'm showing you a picture. There is a picture of a person smoking. What are your emotional responses towards smoking?
It may or may not be pleasant to the person who's smoking, but it is unpleasant to the people around him.
So A stands for affect. Affect stands for feelings. Feelings can be favorable, feelings can be unfavorable, feelings can be pleasant, feelings can be unpleasant, feelings can be good, feelings can be bad. B stands for behavior. When I say behavior, it means my actions, my responses, my overt behavior, my overt responses, that which I can observe. So what is my behavior regarding this particular picture regarding smoking? So when you see someone smoking, what will you do?
If I feel very unpleasant about it, I will request them to either quit it for that particular moment.
We now go on to the third one. Okay, I talked about behavior. Now I'm going on to the cognitive dimension. What is cognitive? Cognitive is something to do with your thinking, your ideas, your information that you have regarding smoking. Now let's look at the transparency. I have attitude against smoking. A affective component is made up of feelings and emotions. So the tobacco companies make me very angry. B stands for behavioral component. I can write letters to the representatives in my taluk representatives in my town to tell them I do not like smoking, so can you do something about it? Finally, you have the cognitive component, and when I say cognitive component, I mean my thoughts and my beliefs. And my belief is smokers are killing themselves and the tobacco companies are helping them to do it. Any attitude, even regarding a dog, regarding your teachers, it has an A component. I love my teachers. B component, so whenever I see behavior, whenever I see the teacher, I wish her, and on Teacher's Day I give her a card and a rose. Behavior. C, cognitive, I admire teachers. And when I think, as soon as I finish my final year, I will do my BEd training, and I think I will definitely become a teacher and mold people's lives. Now, how do we form attitudes? How do we acquire attitudes? What are the different sources of attitudes?
The environment,
Very good. Environment.
It can be genetic.
It could be genetic.
people's opinions,
People's opinions.
situations,
Situations.
Society.
Society.
experience,
Experience. Wonderful, wonderful. All of you have given me beautiful answers. Now we go on to the formation of attitudes. How are attitudes formed? How are attitude acquired? We are having certain theories, and in our learning chapter in the first year, we learn the first theory of conditioning. And what is that first theory of conditioning?
Classical conditioning.
Okay, yes, Priscilla, what is classical conditioning?
It's learning by simple association.
Very good, learning by simple association. You find that lot of our attitudes are learned through classical conditioning. Stats, this person called Stats, S-T-A-A-T-S, Stats conducted an experiment. He took neutral words like two important countries, Sweden and Holland. And he took two neutral people called Bill and John. And what did he do? He brought about two types of emotional words. Negative emotional words like horrible, bad, and positive emotional words like beautiful, happy. And after pairing these words together at the end of the experiment, he found that people who heard the negative pairings had a negative attitude towards people from Sweden, and those who heard the positive pairings had a positive attitude towards people from Holland.
Ma'am, can you give me another example about it?
Sure, I will definitely give you another example. Consider those soldiers in the Iraq war when they were in the Persian Gulf. All these soldiers were marooned for a long time there. Once the whole situation was over, the war was over, many of the soldiers complained that they hated sandy beaches. They never liked sand because they have such negative association with sand. So there you see their negative attitude towards an object or towards a concept called sand. Another important example is you love your aunt and your aunt wears a particular perfume. So whenever you smell that perfume, you feel nice because that perfume reminds you of your most favorite aunt. So anytime a neutral stimulus is associated with another stimulus, and if at all there is a positivity or a negativity towards it, you find that some sort of classical conditioning has taken place, and that plays a very important role in forming our attitudes. Is it clear? Classical conditioning. Now tell me the second important form of conditioning.
Operant conditioning.
Yes, operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is learning through consequences, learning through rewards, learning through reinforcers, learning through punishment, which was another type of learning we learnt in the chapter learning.
modeling, ma'am,
Very good. What is modeling also known as?
learning through imitation,
Very good, Ansu. Modeling is also known as learning through imitation. It is known as social learning theory. It was given to us by Bandura. So the third important way I acquire attitudes is through observational learning. The next theory is given to us by Strata in 1994. It is called the information processing theory. Now the next three theories that I'm going to talk today are all cognitive theories where I collect information. You have come to my class, you are learning much more about psychology, and the more you are hearing, the more we are discussing about psychology, the more you love psychology. So you average all the information together and say, I love psychology. So you put all your information together, you process the information that is coming to you, you analyze the information that is coming to you, you evaluate the information, and you come to a particular attitude. And that is what is meant by information processing theory. Now who will explain once again information theory, processing theory?
You analyze all the factors and then you form an opinion. Suppose, for example, if we take psychology, we consider all the favorable, all unfavorable, and if there are more number of favorable factors, we conclude that we love psychology.
Very good, and that is the information processing theory given to us by Strata in 1994. Another recent theory has been given to us by BEM. It is known as the self-perception theory. Alice, could you tell me more why you love ice cream?
Because it makes me feel nice.
It makes me feel nice. So when I do something because it makes me feel nice, because I enjoy doing it, I'm looking within myself and formulating an opinion, having an attitude towards ice cream. And that is called the self-perception theory. When I look at my own perception, my own experiences, my own thoughts and feelings, and that is why I love ice cream. Why do you love dogs, Priscilla?
Because they are like friends, and you can show your emotions to them, and they do show emotions towards you as well.
Okay, okay. So do you feel very warm when you hug a dog?
Yes.
Yes. And the last theory we are going to talk about is the mere exposure to the object of the attitude given to us by Zazong. Zazong says, when I'm exposed to some object and the more familiar I become, there is a tendency for me to become more and more favorable towards that object. It is quite similar to the other object, but since Zazong has put his own ideas, we now consider the last important theory in attitude formation given by Zazong. So what does Zazong say?
Zazong says the exposure to the object, and the more we are exposed to an object and on a daily basis, we develop a favorable or an unfavorable attitude towards it.
Very good, Swati. Now please remember, I have to be exposed. What I'm not exposed to, I do not know it exists. So I have to be exposed, and there is a chance that when the more and more I'm exposed to an object, it could be favorable, it could be unfavorable. Now, when I am born, I'm very helpless. Who looks after me?
Mother.
Mother. Who else?
Yeah, relatives.
Relatives. Okay. So now we are also considering what are our sources of attitudes. We finished talking about the acquiring of attitudes. We talked about the different processes. Now we are going to talk about the sources of attitudes. So I'm learning my attitudes, looking around, and through the interaction with people around me. So one of the most important source of forming my attitudes is through interaction with people. The first one I'm going to discuss today is my reference group. Which is my first reference group?
Family.
Very good, Alice. Family is my first reference group. My father and my mother are the most important agents of socialization. I've learned most of my values, most of my attitudes, most of my thinking from my parents, from people around me, people who looked after me. So, who is the second important reference group?
Wherever you study, or school or college.
Very good. School. So, in school, who plays a very important role in affecting your attitudes?
Teacher.
Teachers?
Friends.
Friends? Excellent. So, teachers and peer group. What do you mean by peer group?
Friends or your contemporaries, whoever's around you.
Very good. Your age mates. In other words, your age mates and the people whom you regularly hang out with, they also influence your attitudes. That is why the second way you learn is through social comparison. You compare your ideas, your opinion with your group. And mentally you do the comparison, and at times you realize your friends love smoking, and for me to be in that group, I think I have to learn to smoke, and ultimately I change my attitude, I change my beliefs to be one amongst the group. So many of our attitudes are because of interaction with people. The first way is because of reference group. The second way is social comparison. Another way is through discussion. All of you sit together, your peer group sits together, your daddy sit together, your mommy sit together, and they sit and discuss. They discuss about certain issues, certain objects, certain problems in the society, and they have their own attitudes. So through discussion also, you learn certain attitudes. Well, I can also put child rearing techniques under this broad heading of sources of attitudes formation. How does child rearing techniques help us to form attitudes?
Ma'am, what are child rearing techniques?
How have I been brought up? Child rearing are the techniques, the different ways mommy and daddy have brought me up. How did they reward me? How did they punish me? How did they love me? How did they introduce discipline in my life? These are the techniques that I have learned. So depending upon my parents, their values, their way of bringing me up, I have acquired, I have formed certain attitudes. And finally, I form major of my attitudes through mass media. What is mass media?
Television.
Television,
Newspapers.
newspapers,
Radio.
radio, magazines. Do you think they influence your attitudes?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you give me an example how magazines, TV, radio, and internet influences your attitudes?
You get carried away by advertisements.
You get beautiful. You get carried away through advertisements, and there also they use the techniques of classical conditioning. Why do you think attitudes are very important?
They define the way we move in society, our social groups.
They define the way you move in society, your social groups. Very good.
They determine your character.
They determine your character.
Helps in socialization.
Helps in socialization. So I would say they guide our thoughts, and that touches the cognitive dimension, the C of your ABC. C, they guide your thoughts. They influence your feelings, and that is the A, affective function. And finally, they affect your behavior, that is the B. And behavior, action, is also known as the conative function of behavior. So you find that cognitive, affective, and the conation dimension of our behavior is touched. So attitudes play a very important role. They guide, they influence, and affect our behavior. Now we have to talk about how attitudes influence our behavior, and there are two theories. There are two theories how attitudes influence our behavior. If we look at the diagram, the first behavioral theory is the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior. Now, what does it mean, the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior? I first have an attitude towards a specific behavior. There are subjective norms. There is perceived behavioral control, which affects intention and ultimately my behavior. Anytime I have to do something, take an action, when I talk about the theory of reasoned action, it tells us that human beings are very logical. They sit and they think. I consider my options. I weigh my pros and cons. I consider the consequences. I consider the effects. I consider the outcomes. And then I make a decision. And that decision affects my intention. And depending upon my intention, there is my behavior. I wanted to come to class today. And I felt if I come to class, I love my psychology. I want to come to my class. I thought about it. I would love to come to class. So I came to class and I have a very strong intention. I love psychology. I love my teacher. And so you are here, your level is very high, your intention, and here is your behavior. Attitude, intention, behavior. Now you are having another addition to this theory called the theory of planned action, theory of planned behavior, where Askin and Fishbane brought about two more important factors to intentions. And the two important factors are subjective norms and perceived behavioral control. They said intentions are affected by attitude, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control. Now, what does this mean? What is my attitude towards ear piercing? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it favorable or unfavorable? Let me presume it is favorable. I love ear piercing. So the first important point that is going to affect my intention is attitude towards a specific behavior. And what is my behavior? Ear piercing. So my attitude is favorable. Subjective norms. I look at the people around me. Right now I'm in college, so my peer group is very important. What does Priscilla feel about ear piercing? And she says, wow, if you pierce your ears, you're going to look very smart. And Priyanka says, yes, you look hot. And Annie says, you look cool. Okay, so she has got the subjective norms. Now she goes to the third important component in this intention is perceived behavioral control. I know of a person, I know of a beauty parlor that is going to pierce my ear. And the chances are my intention is high because my attitude is favorable, my inner circle friends are favorable, and I know where to get it done. And what's my behavior? I get it done. I don't like ear piercing, and I look around and my immediate circle is all my friends will not look at me if I come like that. They'll say, see how you look so ugly. You don't look smart at all. And then I don't have the money to go to the beauty parlor. So what happens to my intention? It gets crushed, and so I do not pierce my ear. So the first important theory we discussed today is the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior. I sit and plan, I weigh the pros and cons, I weigh the consequences, the outcomes, the effects. Then I look at my inner circle. Sometimes my inner circle is my peer group, sometimes my inner circle is my family. Sometimes my inner circle may be my spouse. Will my spouse like it if I pierce my ear? So I consider my inner circle, and then I look at the availability. How much can I control that? Do I have the money? Do I know of someone who's very good? Can I get it easily? And that affects my intention and ultimately my behavior. We go on to the next important model, and that model is attitude to behavior and process model. Attitude to behavior and process model. Hey, not all the time I can sit and think, will I act like that? There are times I'm standing in a queue waiting to pay the fees, and somebody just comes in between and stands there. So what are you going to do? How does your attitude affect your behavior? How does this event affect your behavior?
We act immediately.
How do you act immediately?
Tell them that everybody's waiting, so please.
Very good. It depends upon, how will you act, Ansu?
Excuse me, we came first.
Okay. Yes, Alice, how will you act?
I might not react, ma'am.
Yeah, why won't you react? Because you are a very holy person and you want to say, it's okay, poor thing, maybe it's okay. Now, it all depends upon, over here they consider the event, I have to act fast, event, the moment somebody comes, that's the event, it touches your cognition and it looks at your knowledge of social norms, hey, this is not done, but I use my own discretion, I perceive it in my own different ways, and there is behavior. So this is the second important theory as to how attitudes influence our behavior. And that theory is known as attitude to behavior process model. To conclude, attitudes are evaluations of any aspect of the social world. They are often acquired from other persons through social learning, classical conditioning, instrumental conditioning, or observational learning. They are also formed on the basis of social comparison. Attitudes seem to influence behavior through two different mechanisms. And which are the two theories? Can we sum up the two theories? What's the first theory?
Theory of reasoned action and planned behavior.
Very good. The theory of reasoned action and planned behavior. And the second theory, Swati?
Attitude to behavior and process model.
Very good. So when we give careful thought to our attitudes, intentions derived from attitudes strongly predict the behavior. And in situations in which we can't engage in such deliberate thought, attitudes influence behavior by shaping our perceptions of the situations.